The dimly lit corners of the Shadow Realm bar had never seemed so oppressive, nor had its shadows felt so hostile. The trader, once a man of influence, moving in the hidden circles with quiet authority, was now little more than a husk, stripped bare and left with nothing but his memories and fear. Sitting alone at a small scratched table in the human side of the bar, he kept his gaze low, watching the flickering light in his empty glass. His hands trembled as he held it, knuckles white, the faint clinking of the glass against the wood betraying his nerves. He'd ordered a drink but hadn't touched it. Every sip tasted like bile, tainted by the humiliation he'd suffered and the looming spectre of vengeance he feared would find him soon. Across the bar, regular patrons laughed and traded stories, unaware of his turmoil. But to him, every voice seemed a whisper plotting against him, every glance a sign of impending danger. He hadn't slept in days, not since Calithra, the one he'd once betrayed, the child he'd handed over to the Demon King, stripped him of his powers and his birthright, leaving him powerless, vulnerable, and alone. In his paranoia, he thought he saw Shade's silhouette lurking in the periphery, the figure's silent, judging gaze piercing through the crowd. He blinked, trying to shake the image from his mind, but it clung to him, reminding him of the one person who had every reason to come after him for what he'd done. Shade, Calithra's loyal protector, would no doubt relish seeing him suffer. The shadows in the bar seemed to pulse with life, dancing mockingly around him. They curled at the edges of his vision, refusing to let him forget the treachery that had brought him to this moment. His breathing quickened as his eyes darted around, searching for anyone who might be watching him, anyone who might know. "What are you doing here, trader?" A voice from behind startled him. It was the bartender, a gruff man with a scar that ran from his cheek to his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at the once powerful figure sitting before him. The trader forced a laugh, a dry, brittle sound that barely resembled laughter. "Just resting my feet," he muttered, avoiding the bartender's gaze. The bartender scoffed, unimpressed, and moved on, leaving him to his misery. He slumped back in his chair, head pounding as he tried to steady his thoughts. He couldn't stay here forever, hiding among the shadows and hoping for a reprieve. But where could he go? Outside, the supernatural world was filled with those who would relish seeing him destroyed, and on the human side, he was nothing, just another nobody with nowhere to turn. Maybe. Black Dawn, he thought, a glimmer of hope breaking through his despair. He'd heard whispers of the group before, a shadowy faction with a reputation for dealing in the darker arts, beings who didn't ask questions about alliances or morality, but he had no idea how to contact them. And the thought of walking blindly into another pact with dark forces left him cold. As he pondered his dwindling options, he felt a strange sensation, the prickling awareness of being watched. He glanced up, his heart racing, and his gaze landed on her, Rose, leaning against the far wall, her eyes sharp and amused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. She was an enigma, one of the few who seemed to flow effortlessly between the human and supernatural sides of the bar. She knew everything that happened here, every secret, every whispered plot, every betrayal. If anyone could help him, it was her. But he knew enough about Rose to know that nothing came without a price. He swallowed, his pride a distant memory, and made his way over to her. She watched his approach with the same faintly entertained smile, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Rose," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need information." She raised an eyebrow, the smile widening just slightly. "Oh, I'm sure you do," she replied, her voice smooth and mocking. "And I'm sure it's very urgent." Her tone made it clear she knew exactly how far he'd fallen, and she savoured every second of his desperation. He clenched his fists, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm willing to pay," he said, though he had little left to offer. His voice cracked, revealing the panic lurking beneath the surface. Rose tilted her head, pretending to think it over. The trader, brought to begging. Oh, what a delicious sight. I must admit, I never thought I'd see the day. He grit his teeth. Do you know how to contact Black Dawn? Her expression turned thoughtful, though her eyes sparkled with wicked amusement. Maybe, she said, drawing out the word, but it'll cost you. He took a shaky breath, barely daring to hope. Name your price. She leaned in, her voice low and dangerous. I'll take one thing, that little bit of pride you have left. I want you to kneel and beg me. Humiliation flared in his chest, but he was too far gone to refuse. He lowered himself to his knees, the murmur of nearby patrons reaching his ears as they noticed the scene. The once proud trader, reduced to grovelling on the floor of the bar, his pride stripped away by the very people he'd once looked down upon. Rose laughed softly, clearly delighted. Good boy, she cooed, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Here's what I'll tell you. Black Dawn has eyes everywhere. They'll find you, if you're valuable enough. He looked up, desperation clouding his vision. How will they know I'm valuable? She shrugged, feigning indifference. That's your problem, trader. Prove your worth and maybe they'll come knocking. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him kneeling in the dust and shadows of the bar, the laughter of nearby patrons echoing in his ears. For the first time, he felt the weight of his choices, the bitter consequences of a life built on betrayal and deceit. And as he rose slowly to his feet, he realized that he was truly alone, stripped of everything he'd once relied on. But desperation has a way of breeding courage, or perhaps insanity. And as he walked back to his table, one thought kept repeating in his mind. I will find a way. I will survive this, no matter the cost. In the shadows of the bar, a flicker of determination kindled in his eyes. It wasn't redemption he sought, nor forgiveness. It was power. And he would do whatever it took to regain it. The trader sat alone in the darkest corner of the Shadow Realm bar, cloaked in shadows as if he could become one with them. He'd barely stepped outside the bar since Caelithra had stripped him of his powers. The cold, endless ache left in their place gnawed at his bones, a constant reminder of his fall. He could still feel the faint tendrils of darkness that clung to him, residual scraps from his pact with the Demon King, but without his birthright, they were weaker, unpredictable. Every time the door creaked open, he flinched, expecting to see Caelithra's icy glare or Shade's unyielding vengeance. Paranoia seeped into his every thought. He'd sit with his back to the wall, watching every figure, reading every movement. Tonight, he was steeling himself, calculating his options when he sensed a figure approaching. Rose! She slid into the seat across from him, her expression casually curious, almost bored. Her fiery red hair glinted under the low light, casting an ominous glow on her face. The trader looked away, hoping she'd lose interest, but he knew better. Rose loved the scent of desperation. Well, well, she began, her voice like honeyed poison, the mighty traitor reduced to skulking like a frightened cat. And here I thought you had bigger ambitions. The trader shifted uncomfortably, forcing himself to meet her piercing gaze. What do you want, Rose? Rose leaned forward, her smile twisting into something sharper. It's more about what you want, I think, she said, examining her nails with casual disinterest. Isn't that why you're hiding in the bar like a worm? You need something. Or rather, someone. The trader scowled, biting back a retort. She was toying with him, savouring every moment, and he knew it. Still, she was his only chance, and she knew more about the shadows within the bar than anyone else. I need information, he admitted reluctantly, his voice barely a whisper. Someone with power, someone who can give me an edge. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, and she cocked her head, feigning surprise. Oh, information, is it? And what exactly do you have to offer in return? The trader swallowed hard. He'd expected this. Nothing came free with Rose, and the price would no doubt be steep. He fumbled for words. I can get you anything. There are still those who respect me. Rose laughed, a soft, mocking sound that echoed in the near-empty bar. Respect you? Darling, they barely tolerate your presence now. She tapped a finger to her lips, pretending to consider. But I could be persuaded. Perhaps. He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to lash out. What do you want? Rose leaned in close, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. I want the leverage, something I can use if this little game becomes tiresome. You're going to tell me everything you know about the Demon King, about Kalithra's powers, and how you once crawled into his favor. She smiled again, that sharp, unsettling smile. Only then might I consider helping you find your edge. The trader hesitated. Revealing the Demon King's secrets was treasonous, a betrayal he wasn't sure he'd survive. But he had little choice. With a reluctant nod, he began to speak, his voice barely above a murmur. As he shared fragments of his dealings with the Demon King, Rose listened intently, her eyes narrowing as she soaked in every detail, every lingering hint of darkness that might still cling to him. Finally, when he finished, he looked at her, waiting for her response. She tilted her head, lips curving into a smirk. That wasn't so hard, was it? She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. Now, here's a name for you. Black Dawn. The trader's eyes widened. He'd heard whispers of them, but they were elusive, powerful, and dangerous beyond measure. Rose withdrew her hand, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. They're who you're looking for. But remember, if you so much as breathe my name, I'll make sure whatever's left of you is nothing but ash. With a final mocking smile, Rose stood and strode away, leaving the trader alone, feeling more exposed and vulnerable than ever. Black Dawn. The name echoed in his mind, an invitation and a warning all in one. He didn't know what he was stepping into, but he had no other choice. And as he sat there trying to steady his hands, he couldn't shake the feeling that his nightmare had only just begun. The trader stayed slumped in his seat at the Shadow Realm bar, eyes darting to every shadow that flickered. His once proud stance was now hunched, fearful. Kalithra's parting act had shattered him. He was powerless, a man without status or a kingdom to call his own. The trader, once proud and cunning, was now nothing more than a husk haunted by every flicker of movement in the bar. Fear lingered around every corner, each shadow seeming to hold a new threat. And that's when she slipped into view. Rose. Watching him struggle through his drink, her smirk grew as she saw the cracks in his once cocky facade. She sidled up to him, her red hair catching the dim light, and her eyes alight with that distinct glimmer of mischief. Rose didn't need powers to strike fear. She knew enough to set his world alight with terror just by being present. Well, look who's seen better days, she said, her voice a whisper laced with mockery, fingers tracing the edge of his glass. No powers, no allies, no kingdom. You're quite the sorry sight, trader. He glared, but the look lacked his former venom. Enjoying yourself? He asked, his voice trembling as he tried to hide the bitterness. Is this your idea of fun, Rose? Fun? She chuckled, drawing the word out. You've lost your touch, trader. You used to be so in control. But desperation looks good on you. She leaned closer, her gaze narrowing. The real question is, how far are you willing to go to get back some semblance of power? The trader looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I need information, he muttered. Something, anything, that can help. Rose's smile grew wider. Oh, I do have information. But you're going to pay for it, she replied smoothly. And I don't mean in coin. No, I want a favor. A real favor. Something I can call on. Anytime. Anywhere. He hesitated, her words sinking in. A favor for Rose was no light deal. The trader knew it could be his undoing, but the sting of his current state pushed him forward. After a moment, he nodded. Fine. Name it. Her eyes danced with triumph. Good choice. Now, there's a group in need of your unique talents. They're interested in supernatural power, knowledge, the kind of dark information only someone who once served the Demon King could provide. His pulse quickened as he considered her words. Black Dawn, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the bar. She nodded, her smirk widening. The very same. They'll want what you know about Caelithra, her powers, and especially the darkness she fought against. Oh, they'll come to you. She trailed her fingers across his shoulder as she turned to leave. Or maybe you'll go crawling to them. With a final triumphant smile, she was gone. Hours later, as the trader stepped out into the chill night air, a figure cloaked in shadow approached, and without a word pressed a cold, dark card into his hand. A silver crescent marked it, barely visible in the dim glow of the bar lights. His blood ran cold as he recognized the symbol. "Welcome to the fold," a deep, echoing voice whispered. "You know the terms of our agreement. Fail, and you'll wish Caelithra had ended you." The trader stumbled down the dark alley behind the Shadow Realm bar, clutching the small, ominous card in his trembling hand. It was all he had left. A flimsy, unsettling promise of potential power wrapped in peril. The silver crescent glowed faintly, as though mocking him, as he traced it with a shaking finger. The darkness closed in around him, suffocating and cold. Every step he took seemed to echo louder, bouncing off the narrow walls, amplifying the empty silence. Each flicker of shadow threatened to consume him. He had spent his life lurking in the shadows, but now, stripped of his powers, they felt like strangers, hostile and mocking. For the first time in years, he felt truly afraid. "Black Dawn," he whispered, trying to muster the courage to face whatever lay ahead. He had no choice. Rose's voice still echoed in his mind, dripping with that signature mixture of contempt and amusement. He could practically feel her watching, reveling in his misery. This was her game, he knew, and he was the desperate pawn. But he couldn't let her see him break. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the edge of the alley, where a dimly lit warehouse loomed. Its walls were cracked and covered in grime, with boarded windows and a heavy metal door that bore deep, jagged scratches. The building reeked of neglect, but he knew better. Appearances were deceiving in his world. The trader took a deep breath, steeling himself. He knocked 3 times, each one echoing down the empty street. A slot in the door slid open, revealing 2 cold, predatory eyes peering out. They studied him with a calculated intensity, taking in every inch of his worn, pitiful state. "What's your business?" the voice behind the eyes demanded, gruff and low. I have information," he replied, his voice wavering but desperate. "Information you want. About Caelithra, the last princess of Nethoria." There was a pause, and he felt those eyes narrow. For a heartbeat, he thought they might turn him away, that his gamble had failed. But then, with a metallic scrape, the door swung open, and a figure motioned him inside. The trader hesitated, looking over his shoulder one last time at the open street behind him. He could feel the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him, but he was too far gone to turn back now. Swallowing his fear, he stepped over the threshold. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of incense and something darker, something acrid and bitter. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting in strange shapes, as though the darkness itself was alive. A dozen figures in hooded cloaks lined the room, their faces hidden but their gazes unyielding, each one studying him with silent judgment. In the centre of the room, seated on a throne-like chair draped in crimson cloth, was a figure who exuded an air of cold authority. The trader couldn't see the face beneath the hood, but he could feel the intensity of the gaze that settled on him. "So," the figure drawled, the voice smooth but dangerous, "you are the one they called the trader, and now you come crawling to Black Dawn. A broken shell. How? Poetic. The trader clenched his fists, willing himself not to crumble. I may be broken, but I still have worth, he said, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. I can give you knowledge, things no one else could know, secrets about the Demon King's darkness and the power Kaelithra holds. The leader leaned forward, the hood shifting just enough for him to see a glimpse of a scarred, twisted smile. You think you can bargain with us, after what you've lost? The trader felt his throat tighten. They knew. Of course they did. Rose had likely spread word of his disgrace far and wide, but he pushed on, knowing this was his only chance. I know where her weaknesses lie. I was once her guardian, entrusted by her parents. I know the ancient powers that bind her realm. The figure let out a low chuckle. Yes, the fallen protector, turned betrayer. How fitting that you come to us now. The leader rose slowly, moving closer until the trader could feel the icy chill radiating from beneath the cloak. Tell me, trader, what are you truly willing to give? He swallowed hard, feeling a bead of cold sweat trickle down his spine. Whatever it takes, he whispered. Just give me a chance to regain what I've lost. Ah, the leader mused, voice barely more than a whisper. So desperate, so weak. A hand reached out, fingers tipped with metal claws, pressing against the trader's forehead. Then I will grant you a taste of power, but know this, once you start down this path, there is no return. You will become ours, bound to our will, fail us, and your end will be unpleasant. A shiver ran through him, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he forced himself to meet that shadowed gaze and nodded, sealing his fate. The figure's hand pressed harder and a surge of dark energy shot through him. Pain ripped through his body, searing and unrelenting, but he bit back the scream. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. When it was over, he collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The dark energy pulsed within him, colder and sharper than anything he'd ever felt. A twisted echo of the powers he'd once wielded. It was a mere shadow of what he'd known before, but it was something. And it was enough. Welcome to Black Dawn, the leader intoned, a satisfied gleam in those hidden eyes. Now go, trader. Prove your loyalty, and perhaps you may rise again. As the trader stumbled out into the night, his mind raced with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. He was no longer powerless. He had allies. Dangerous, dark allies who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. And he, the broken man he'd become, would do anything to ensure he never felt weak again. For now, he had a purpose. The Shadow Realm bar was quieter than usual. Shadows flickered in the dim lighting, casting eerie patterns across the walls. Rose lounged at her usual table, watching the ebb and flow of patrons with a faint smirk, content to simply observe, her presence an unsettling yet magnetic force in the room. But her evening took an unexpected turn when a familiar figure appeared, sticking to the edges of the shadows like a creature hunted. The trader. He slinked in, gaze darting to every corner, shoulders hunched with paranoia, and approached Rose's table with a hesitance she hadn't seen before. She arched an eyebrow, taking in his disheveled appearance and nervous eyes. The trader had once been proud, confident, a man whose power rivaled some of the most formidable creatures. But now, stripped of his birthright and scrambling for anything to restore his lost power, he was a shadow of his former self. Well, well, Rose purred, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. If it isn't the infamous trader. What brings you here looking like a dog who lost his bone? He glared but swallowed whatever retort had come to mind, opting instead for a more subdued tone. I need your help, Rose. She tilted her head, a mocking smile spreading across her face. My help? Since when does the mighty trader ask anyone for help? Since she took everything, he hissed, bitterness flashing in his eyes. Calithra. She stripped me of my powers, my birthright. I have nothing left, Rose. I need to reclaim what's mine. Rose's gaze sharpened, her smile deepening. Oh, I'd love to hear more about how you lost everything. But you're here for something more specific, aren't you? She leaned back, crossing her arms. So, tell me, trader, what exactly do you want? He glanced around, his voice dropping to a tense whisper. There's a drug. I've heard it's circulating here in the human world, and that it can grant strength, even power. I need it. Rose laughed, a rich, taunting sound that echoed in the dim room. You want to reclaim your power with a little pill? Oh, how the mighty have fallen. And here I thought you still had some pride left. He scowled, his jaw tightening. Do you have it or not? Rose leaned forward, her voice like velvet, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Either way, it'll cost you. Everything's already been taken, he snapped, though there was a desperate tremor in his voice. What more could you possibly want? She smiled, a slow, predatory grin. Your loyalty. When I call for it, I want your absolute, unquestioning loyalty. Think of it as a debt to be repaid whenever I see fit. He hesitated, his pride and desperation at war, but ultimately his need for power won out. Fine, he muttered through gritted teeth, though his face twisted with barely concealed resentment. Whatever it takes. Rose's smirk deepened, satisfaction glittering in her eyes. Perfect. Now, as for this little elixir of yours, I'll see what I can dig up. Just remember. Her voice softened, a whisper edged with malice. There's always a price, trader. Always. As he turned to leave, her voice echoed in his mind, a sinister reminder of the bargain he'd just made. Watching him slink away, Rose felt a dark thrill pulse through her veins. She'd have to move quickly if she wanted to get ahead of whoever was behind this drug. Once she was alone, Rose pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd acquired through subtle charms and tricks. She waited, almost giddy with amusement as the line connected. Darren was deep into the evening, cleaning his shotgun, when his phone buzzed, breaking his concentration. He glanced down, frowning at the unknown number lighting up the screen. With a slight sigh, he picked up. Yeah, who's this? A familiar, sultry voice answered, dripping with playful mischief. Darren, darling, you wound me. How could you not recognize the voice of your favorite queen? He froze, caught completely off guard. How the hell did you get my number? A light laugh came through the receiver. Oh, please, I have my ways. Besides, I thought you'd be thrilled to hear from me. I'm inviting you for a drink. Promise I won't cast any spells on you, unless you ask nicely. Darren raised an eyebrow, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening in. Uh-huh. And I'm supposed to believe this isn't some trap? Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm allergic to supernatural entanglements. Rose let out a sigh, clearly savouring the moment. You wound me again. I'm just offering you a professional exchange. Seems we share a little mystery, and I know you've got a sample of that the funny new drug circulating around my territory. Darren's interest piqued, though his suspicion didn't waver. You got a name for this drug? Let's just call it a nuisance for now. Meet me at the bar later, and we'll talk details. Don't be late, Darren. I'd hate to think you didn't trust me. With a sly chuckle, she hung up, leaving Darren staring at his phone with a mix of confusion and suspicion. He needed to be prepared, so he headed straight for Eli's workshop. She was engrossed in her latest experiment, barely glancing up when he entered. You'll never guess who just invited me out for drinks, he said, holding up his phone. Without missing a beat, Eli replied, I'm going to guess it wasn't Clara offering to help you train. Funny, he muttered. It was Rose. She somehow got my number and promised not to cast any spells on me. You wouldn't happen to have any enchantment shields lying around, would you? Finally looking up, Eli smirked. Oh, the great Darren, afraid of a little enchantment. What's next, asking me to babysit you? Very funny. I just don't trust her. She's got that whole I'll eat you alive and smile about it vibe. She chuckled, handing him a small enchanted amulet. Here, this should block any charms or glamours she might throw your way. But remember, no amulet's foolproof. If you find yourself falling for her, that's on you. He tucked the amulet under his shirt, grumbling. That's reassuring. Thanks, Keebler. Later that night, Darren arrived at the bar, the amulet securely in place. He spotted Rose lounging at a corner table, her red hair casting an eerie glow under the dim lights. As he approached, she gave him a smile that was both inviting and dangerous. Ah, I see you're still upright and breathing. Good start. Darren slid into the seat across from her, matching her grin with a smirk of his own. You'd be surprised how often that's a victory. They exchanged banter, each one testing the other, but underneath it all, Darren could sense something darker brewing. Rose leaned in, her playful tone dropping. So, about this little drug floating around, you're not the only one interested in its origins. I want it off my turf, but that's hard to do without a source. Darren raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his drink. Sounds like the Queen's losing control. Thought you had eyes everywhere in this place. With a dangerous smile, she leaned even closer. Careful, Earthborn. You've got one piece of the puzzle, but if you'd rather sip your drink and walk away, I could always find another ally. Her tone was layered with a barely concealed threat, but Darren didn't flinch. He studied her, catching a flash of something in her gaze, something personal. Fine, he said, holding her stare. You want this taken off your turf? Let's start with what you know. She slid a folded note across the table with names marked down, users and their strange side effects. Rose watched him pocket the list, her smirk returning as if satisfied by his reaction. Be careful, Darren, she whispered, her voice a velvet warning. You're dealing with more than you realize. He gave her one last look before standing to leave, feeling the weight of her gaze lingering like a promise. Behind him, Rose watched with a knowing smile, fingers idly brushing the bracelet that kept her magic in check, already planning her next move. Darren strode into the workshop, his steps purposeful, but a glint of mischief danced in his eyes. He'd just come from a rather enlightening meeting with Rose. She had provided more questions than answers, and he was ready to loop in the team, sensing that they were standing on the edge of something big and sinister. He found Gunnar leaning over a set of blueprints in the workshop, studying them intently. Without any formalities, Darren slid up beside him, his voice low but with a hint of urgency. Hey, I think we need to bring Sophia in on this, Darren began, making it sound almost like a casual afterthought, though his tone betrayed his real intent. Gunnar looked up, giving him that familiar no-nonsense look. Sophia, you think she's caught wind of this drug? Darren shrugged, a smirk on his face. Come on, it's Sophia. The woman knows things before the rest of us even suspect anything. And besides, she's got connections that run way deeper than ours. Might as well tap into them, right? Gunnar crossed his arms, thoughtful. Sophia was more than just an asset. She had her own web of informants, contacts, and the occasional favour owed, which extended well into the supernatural underworld. If there were whispers about this drug circulating among the shadows, Sophia would have already heard them. Gunnar gave a slight nod. All right. We bring her in, but carefully. I don't want her in the crossfire without a clear plan. Darren grinned, clearly pleased. Perfect. I'll make the call. Get Eli in here too, Gunnar added. She's already been working on analysing that sample, and I want her input on how we're going to handle this. We'll pull in Karina too. This is her fight as much as ours. And make sure Shade's looped in. His connections with Nythoria might give us an edge. An hour later, the team assembled in the workshop's briefing room, a dimly lit space lined with walls of ancient maps, tactical screens, and weapons. Eli stood at the holoprojector in the center, fingers gliding over a glowing control panel, as images of the Shadow Realm bar flickered to life before them. The holo display cast a cool blue light across the room, illuminating their faces in eerie shades. Karina sat at the edge of the table, arms crossed, her expression set in stone. Her violet eyes flickered with intensity, the memory of her last encounter with the trader fresh in her mind. Across from her, Shade sat silently, his dark eyes narrowed as he observed every detail of the display, his face unreadable. Darren leaned back in his chair, relaxed yet focused, occasionally glancing at the others as they absorbed the information Eli had meticulously compiled. Eli adjusted the display, and several locations where traces of the drug had been detected highlighted on the holomap, each one connected by thin, pulsing lines. "All right, so here's what we know," Eli began, tapping a point on the map where the Shadow Realm bar was prominently marked. "This bar isn't just any dive. It's one of the most well-guarded places, both in terms of physical and magical defenses. And yet, the trader and a few other dealers seem to be moving this drug under everyone's radar." She zoomed in on another hotspot, a rundown warehouse in the city's industrial zone, then a quiet back alley near a high-end club. "These are the other places where the drug has been reported. It's being moved in small quantities, likely to avoid detection. What we don't know is who's supplying it and why." Gunnar leaned forward, studying the display, his expression dark. "And the drug itself? What did you find, Eli?" Eli exchanged a glance with Darren. "It's potent. Based on what I've gathered so far, it's designed specifically to affect supernatural beings. Gives them a high, an edge in strength, but it's volatile. Humans who've accidentally taken it? Dead within minutes. For our kind, though, it's addictive. Deadly addictive." "Sounds like a twisted way to gain control," Shade said softly, his gaze intent. "And if it's circulating in the bar, then whoever's behind this has serious intentions to corrupt or control power players within the supernatural world." Darren leaned in, his eyes flashing with mischief as he added, "I say we pay the bar a visit, not just to scope it out, but to let our friends there know that Echo Division isn't blind to what's happening." Karina looked up, her voice steady but carrying an edge. "If we're going, we're not just scouting. We're sending a message. I want answers from the trader, and I'm not going to waste time going around in circles." Gunnar looked at her, nodding. "Agreed. But we do this smart. If we storm in there with all guns blazing, we'll tip them off before we even have any leads. We go in calm, cautious, but ready for anything." Darren smirked, resting his hands behind his head. "Calm, cautious, ready for anything. Sounds like my kind of party." The others couldn't help but share a small, knowing smile. The low hum of the holomap filled the workshop's meeting room, casting eerie blue light across the faces gathered around the table. Gunnar stood at the head, his gaze fixed on the pulsing dots scattered across the holographic display. Each mark represented a suspected case, a potential victim or a dealer of the strange new drug circulating through the city's hidden channels. "Eli, run it back from the beginning," he said, nodding at the technomancer, whose violet eyes gleamed in the glow of the display. Eli tapped a few controls, zooming in on the locations highlighted. "We've confirmed 3 sites with drug residue, all in supernatural hotspots. This drug isn't just designed to affect supernaturals, it's almost targeting them, binding to their auras." Attention settled over the room as each member absorbed her words. Darren lounged in his chair, his expression more intense than usual as he eyed the map. Ashley was silent, her posture rigid, and Karina sat forward, her arms crossed tightly. Shade leaned against the wall, half hidden in shadow, his dark gaze fixed on the map with a quiet intensity. Sophia has a faint beeping sound. Her eyes narrowed as she listened to the message, her face going taut with concern. She turned to Gunnar through the holo generator. "Homeland just forwarded a request from local law enforcement. They've encountered... Well, they don't know what they've encountered. A supernatural, out of control and violent. They're asking for backup," Sophia said, her voice grave. The room went still. Darren's eyebrow lifted and a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Local police want our help? This'll be a first." "They don't know it's us and we're keeping it that way," Sophia replied sharply. "As far as they're concerned, we're Homeland contractors. The less they know, the better." Gunnar gave a firm nod. This drug could be behind it. If it's causing that kind of reaction, we need to see it firsthand. He scanned the room, his gaze meeting each of theirs. Darren, Ashley, you're up front. Keep the locals occupied. Eli, I want a full scan of that site. Shade, you're on the perimeter. No one sees anything they shouldn't. Shade inclined his head, his dark eyes glinting. I'll make sure we're invisible. Sophia's voice cut through the room. You're Echo Division. Remember, to them, you don't exist. Stick to protocol, gather intel, and get out clean. We need answers, not casualties. Karina leaned forward, her expression intense. If that drug is harming someone, I won't just stand by. We're stopping this. Gunnar nodded. Agreed, but we do it strategically. No risks, unless absolutely necessary. Everyone gave a short nod, each slipping into mission mode. Eli snapped her case shut, securing her scanning equipment, while Darren casually loaded his shotgun, Thunderstrike, the sleek weapon humming softly as it powered up. Ashley checked her handgun and compact tools, her face set in quiet concentration. Shade adjusted his stance, his silhouette fading into the shadowed corner as he prepared to move. Karina, her katana at her side, tightened her grip on the hilt, a determined fire in her eyes. As they left the workshop, each member steeled themselves for what lay ahead. The night air outside the warehouse was heavy with tension, the distant blare of police sirens echoing off the buildings. A few officers milled about the entrance, their faces drawn and wary, eyes darting to the darkened windows of the warehouse. Echo Division approached the scene with practiced calm, blending into the shadows as they neared the police line. Gunnar lifted a hand, signalling the team to stop just shy of the officer's view. He nodded to Darren and Ashley. Front and centre. Keep it simple. Darren adjusted his grip on Thunderstrike, shooting a playful glance at Ashley. Shall we? She rolled her eyes but gave a small, determined smile. Just try not to scare them off. They approached the police barricade where a few tense officers eyed them suspiciously. One of them, a grizzled sergeant with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward, scanning their gear and weapons with a raised eyebrow. And who exactly are you? He demanded. Darren flashed a badge, his grin disarming. Homeland Security contractors. Heard you've got a situation that's a little unusual? The sergeant's expression shifted, a mix of frustration and relief. Unusual doesn't cover it. Whatever that guy is, he's tearing up the place, and my men can't get close without getting hurt. Darren nodded sympathetically, glancing back toward the warehouse. Let us handle it. Just keep your team back. Things might get complicated. The sergeant hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the prospect of stepping aside, but finally nodded. He's all yours. Just try not to bring the whole building down. Darren shot him a wink. We'll do our best. With the police retreating to the perimeter, Gunnar motioned for the team to enter. They moved quietly, stepping through the doors and into the darkened interior. The air was thick and stale, a faint metallic scent lingering like a warning. At the far end of the room, they saw him. A man hunched in the shadows, his body trembling, his movements erratic and jerky. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the low light, and his eyes stared blankly ahead, wide and unseeing. A dark, sickly aura pulsed around him, twisting and writhing like a living thing. Eli raised her device, scanning the air. Her face tightened as she read the results. It's the drug. His aura's been saturated with it, amplifying his strength and cutting off his control. If he's been in here long, he's gone critical. Karina's jaw clenched, her hand drifting to her katana. She could feel the chaotic energy radiating from him, the unnatural darkness clawing at his essence. The man let out a low, tortured groan, his body contorting as he staggered forward, his fingers clawing at his own skin, his head snapped up, his gaze locking onto them with a primal rage that sent a chill through the room. Gunnar held up a hand, his voice calm and steady. We're not here to fight. Let us help. The man's eyes flashed, a guttural growl rumbling in his chest. His limbs twitched, his body moving with an unnatural, jagged energy, as though he were being pulled by invisible strings. Darren shifted his stance, raising Thunderstrike. Boss? He doesn't look interested in a conversation. Gunner's gaze didn't waver. Hold position. He's still in there somewhere. The man lunged forward, his hands outstretched, fingers curled like claws. Eli's device beeped urgently as she adjusted the settings, scanning for any information that could help. If I can stabilize the charge, I might be able to neutralize it, but I need time. Karina stepped forward, her katana drawn. I'll give you the time. Gunner shook his head, holding her back. We moved together. He's unpredictable. The man's growl grew louder, his eyes wild as he launched himself toward them, his movements frenetic and disjointed. In one fluid motion, Gunner activated his cybernetic arm, the silver dagger extending from his wrist as he moved to intercept. Darren fired a warning shot, the blast from Thunderstrike echoing through the warehouse. The man staggered, but he didn't fall. Instead, he straightened, a twisted smile spreading across his face, his gaze locking onto Darren with a feral glint. From the shadows, Shade's eyes narrowed, his hand resting on the hilt of his dagger as he assessed the situation, ready to intervene. Eli adjusted her device, her fingers moving quickly as she recalibrated. If I can reverse the polarity, I might be able to weaken the bond between the drug and his aura. Gunner gave a short nod. Then do it. Now. Eli's device hummed louder, a faint glow radiating from its core as she recalibrated. The man's face contorted in rage, his body tensing as he prepared to lunge again. In the dim light, his veins pulsed a sickly black, dark tendrils snaking across his skin. Ashley slipped into position, her handgun trained on him as she waited, steady and silent. And then, in one swift motion, the man leaped toward them, a guttural roar escaping his lips. Just as he reached them, Eli's device emitted a high-pitched tone, the glow intensifying. The man froze, his body convulsing, dark energy flickering around him as the drug's hold began to weaken. He let out a strangled cry, his body spasming as the tendrils of darkness around him began to recede. Gunner stepped forward, his voice calm, but commanding. Stand down. We've got you. The man's eyes met his, a flicker of recognition flashing through the haze. Slowly, the dark aura around him faded, leaving him weakened, trembling. Eli's shoulders sagged in relief as she powered down her device. It worked. For now. Karina moved closer, her gaze softening as she looked at the man. You're safe. We'll make sure this doesn't happen again. But as she spoke, a faint, dark shimmer pulsed through his veins again, a chilling reminder that their battle with this drug was far from over. As the man's body slumped, trembling, his ragged breaths filling the silence, Eli reached into her gear bag, pulling out a pair of cuffs that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Gunner, she murmured, stepping up to him and extending the cuffs. These should neutralize what's left of the drug's hold. They'll suppress any residual aura activity, at least until we can get him somewhere secure. Gunner took the handcuffs, his cybernetic fingers curling around them as he gave her a short nod. Let's hope this holds him. Moving forward cautiously, Gunner approached the man whose head lolled weakly to the side, eyes glassy. With practiced care, he slipped the cuffs onto the man's wrists, murmuring quietly, It's over. You're safe now. The magical nullifiers activated with a soft hum, and the dark aura around the man flickered, then vanished. His body seemed to relax and his breathing steadied, though his expression remained haunted, as though he was still caught in a nightmare he couldn't escape. Darren adjusted Thunderstrike across his shoulder, turning toward the police officers watching from outside the building. He exhaled, then squared his shoulders, heading out to deal with the local law. The grizzled sergeant from earlier was waiting just outside, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing as Darren approached. What's the situation? The sergeant demanded, trying to peer past Darren toward the warehouse interior. Darren gave him a tight-lipped smile. We're taking him into custody, he said smoothly, a practiced ease in his tone. Looks like he's part of an ongoing case we're investigating. The sergeant scowled, clearly displeased. So you're just taking him? What about our report? My guys risked their necks in there. Darren held up a hand, his grin never faltering. Homeland appreciates your help. You've kept the public safe tonight, and that's all that matters. We'll handle the rest. He gave a quick, almost dismissive nod, cutting off further argument before the sergeant could protest. The sergeant hesitated, then finally let out a frustrated sigh, motioning to his men to stand down. Darren rejoined the team who had already started moving the man out the back door of the warehouse, avoiding further scrutiny from the police. Shade emerged from the shadows as they exited, his expression calm, but a hint of approval in his eyes at the clean extraction. Back at the Echo Division workshop, the dim, neon-lit room was quiet as Gunnar led the man to a chair in the center, his cuffed wrists resting in his lap. Karina stood nearby, watching the man intently, her gaze a mixture of compassion and intensity. Eli set up her equipment on a nearby table, ready to track any fluctuations in his aura, while Ashley and Shade lingered in the background, alert for any sudden changes. The man glanced around the room, his eyes wide, still dazed, but the nullifying cuffs seemed to keep him steady. He finally looked up at Gunnar, his expression bleak. Where am I? He muttered, his voice barely a whisper, tinged with fear and confusion. Gunnar crouched down, meeting the man's gaze. You're somewhere safe. We know about the drug. We just need you to tell us where you got it. The man's face twisted in agony, as though the very thought of the drug brought back a torrent of horror. He swallowed, his voice shaking as he spoke. I didn't want it. I didn't know what it was. She said it would help, make me stronger, but it was like something else took over. Eli stepped forward, her tone calm but probing. Who gave it to you? The man's eyes darted around, his gaze flickering toward the shadows where Shade lingered, and then to Karina, her intense stare unrelenting. A woman, he whispered, his voice barely audible. She had dark hair, strange eyes, and a smile like she knew every terrible thing I'd ever done. She called herself Ravina. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Gunnar's gaze darkened, and he exchanged a quick glance with Eli. Ravina. The name was new, but her intentions were becoming increasingly clear. Karina's hands clenched at her sides, her voice a low, controlled whisper. Did she say why? Why she wanted you to take it? The man shivered, closing his eyes as though he was reliving the memory. She said it was just the beginning, that it would make us unstoppable. But I can't control it. It's like I'm fighting something else inside me. Gunnar's face hardened, his expression steely. Then this isn't just a power play, it's a means of control. The man's eyes opened again, desperation flaring in their depths. Please, don't let her find me. I can't go back. She'll know. She'll know I spoke to you. Shade's voice came from the shadows, calm but resolute. You're under Echo Division's protection now. No one will reach you here. The man looked at him, a flicker of hope mingling with fear. But as he slumped in the chair, his entire body shivering with exhaustion, he let out a shaky breath. Thank you, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Thank you. Gunnar stood, casting a somber look around the team. We have a name, a lead, and a pattern. This is only the beginning. If Ravana's supplying this drug to the supernatural community, we need to find out where she's operating and who else might be under her influence. The man glanced up at him, a trace of fear still lingering in his gaze. If you find her, you need to stop her. This isn't just a drug, it's a curse. The team left the workshop with their mission clear, their minds set on tracking down Ravina before more supernaturals fell prey to the dark power she wielded. Echo Division's fight was no longer just about containment. It was a race to save lives and to put an end to a new, insidious form of control spreading through the shadows of the city. The silence in the workshop was uneasy, thick with the tension of unresolved questions as the man, cuffed and exhausted, sat slumped in the chair. Gunnar paced nearby, his face a mask of contemplation, while Eli quietly studied the blood sample she'd managed to take before they'd begun questioning him. A sudden deafening roar shattered the silence, and everyone turned as the low hum of rotors grew louder, filling the room with vibrations. The team exchanged wary glances as a bright spotlight pierced the workshop windows, illuminating their dimly lit sanctuary. Darren cursed under his breath, tightening his grip on Thunderstrike. "Did we call for air support?" Gunnar's gaze was dark as he moved toward the entrance, signalling the others to follow. "Not that I know of." They stepped outside, squinting against the spotlight's glare, as a sleek black helicopter descended, the Homeland Security emblem barely visible against the matte paint. As it touched down, the door slid open, and a team of agents clad in dark tactical gear disembarked with brisk, no-nonsense movements. Leading them was a man with an air of authority, his sharp eyes scanning Echo Division with a calculated intensity. He strode forward, stopping in front of Gunnar, extending a hand that went ignored. "Agent Brenner, Homeland Security," the man introduced himself, his voice carrying over the noise of the rotors. "We're here to take custody of the detainee." Gunnar crossed his arms, his stance unyielding. "We weren't notified of any handover." Brenner's expression remained impassive. "That's because it wasn't a request. He's classified as a high-priority individual under national security. I suggest you let us do our job." A flicker of anger crossed Karina's face, and she stepped forward, her voice low and fierce. "You have no idea what this man's been through. He's unstable, barely aware of himself. And now, you want to just whisk him away?" Brenner's gaze moved to her, his expression cold. "And your job is done here. Homeland will handle the debriefing and decide how best to proceed." Darren scoffed, folding his arms, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Sure, because you've done such a great job keeping tabs on this whole operation so far." Ashley's eyes never left the agent's, her fingers subtly resting on the holster at her side, every muscle taut with readiness. Shade remained in the shadows, silent but observant, his gaze locked onto each of the agents, as if assessing their intentions. Eli moved closer to Gunnar, her voice low but determined. "We're not just handing him over. He's been affected by a compound we're still analysing. This isn't just about containment, it's about figuring out what's really going on." Brenner's jaw tightened, though his voice remained steady. "We're aware of the risks. And I assure you, Homeland's resources far exceed what you're working with here." Gunnar's eyes narrowed, his stance resolute. "We know what we're dealing with, and our methods don't involve dragging victims away like criminals. He's unstable because of something we haven't yet identified." Brenner's calm mask slipped, a flicker of frustration breaking through. "Agent," he said, lowering his voice to an authoritative, clipped tone. "This is no longer your jurisdiction. He's a national threat, and we will not waste time debating." Gunnar clenched his fists, clearly weighing his options. He exchanged a glance with Eli, who gave the faintest nod, her hand subtly clutching a vial she'd just capped. She'd managed to draw a quick blood sample while the man had been seated, a small yet vital piece of information they'd keep out of Homeland's hands. The detained man glanced up, his eyes flickering with fear as he watched the agents approach, their expressions hard, unyielding. Karina, her own anger barely contained, turned to Gunnar, her voice taut with urgency. "We can't let them just take him. He knows too much about this drug, about Ravina." Gunnar's gaze softened briefly as he looked at her. "I know, but we play this wrong, and Homeland shuts down every move we make from here on out." Brenner raised a brow, taking a deliberate step forward. "Last chance, Agent Gunnar. Step aside." After a tense moment, Gunnar's shoulders relaxed slightly, though the steely edge never left his gaze. "Fine. But understand that if anything happens to him, it's on your hands." Brenner didn't respond, instead signalling his team, who moved with practiced efficiency, flanking the man as they escorted him toward the helicopter. He stumbled slightly, casting one last glance at the members of Echo Division, a pleading look flickering in his eyes before he was led up the steps and into the chopper's hold. As the rotors began to spin again, Darren spat on the ground, his voice low and bitter. "There goes our best lead." Karina's jaw was clenched, her hands fisted at her sides, the anger radiating off her in waves. He didn't deserve this. Not after everything he's been through. Gunnar placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but laced with a grim determination. "We'll find another way. They may have taken him, but we've got something they don't." He glanced at Eli, who held up the small vial, the faint glow from the sample barely visible under the workshop's dim lights. "This blood sample," Eli murmured, "might just be the key to understanding the drug's true nature, and maybe even tracking its source." The team watched as the helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the night, its red and blue lights fading into the distance. The hollow echo of its departure left a lingering silence, a stark reminder of their powerlessness. But in that silence, each member felt the unspoken resolve. Homeland had taken the detainee, but Echo Division still held a piece of the truth. The workshop was filled with a tense, simmering silence as the team gathered, the fallout from the Homeland extractions still raw. Gunnar stood at the head of the table, his gaze steady but dark, shoulders squared as he delivered orders with a steely precision. "Here's how we're handling this," he began, his voice calm yet unmistakably charged. "Eli, that blood sample needs to be analysed down to the last particle. I want a full breakdown, everything about that drug." Eli nodded, her expression intent as she prepared her equipment, understanding the urgency in his tone. Gunnar's gaze shifted to Karina and Shade. "I want you two back at the warehouse. Homeland's sweep was too quick. Go over every inch. Anything they missed, anything that could lead us back to Ravenna, I want it." Karina's jaw clenched, her eyes blazing with resolve. "We'll find it," she said, glancing at Shade, who gave a solemn nod, his expression focused. Finally, Gunnar turned to Darren, his tone sharpening. "Darren, head to the bar and speak to Rose. See if she's heard anything new about the drug or if her network's picked up on anything we missed. Share what you can. She might be willing to give something back." Darren gave a small smirk, his usual irreverence muted by the weight of the assignment. "Let's hope the Queen is feeling generous." With the team dispersing to their assignments, Gunnar's expression darkened as he pulled a small, well-worn talisman from his pocket. There was unfinished business to handle, and he had questions that only Sophia could answer. Holding the talisman tightly, he muttered a single name. Eliana. A moment later, the air shimmered with light as a portal began to form. Through the translucent glow, Gunnar could see the familiar setting of Sophia's office. Without hesitation, he stepped through, the portal sealing behind him as he emerged in the middle of her office. Sophia looked up from her desk, her eyes widening at his sudden appearance. Recovering quickly, she dismissed her aide with a quick wave of her hand, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness as she met Gunnar's gaze. "Gunnar," she greeted, her tone calm but curious. "This is unexpected." He crossed his arms, his voice low and unyielding. "Since you felt it was acceptable to send your agents into my operation unannounced, I figured I'd return the favour." Sophia's brow furrowed in confusion, a flicker of concern passing over her face. "What are you talking about?" "Homeland's extraction team. They showed up out of nowhere, took my detainee, and sabotaged my operation," Gunnar said, his voice edged with frustration. "If that was your directive, I would have expected you to have the decency to inform me directly." Sophia's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Gunnar, I didn't authorize any extraction team. This is the first I'm hearing about it." He narrowed his gaze, studying her, searching for any hint of deception. But all he saw was the same resolute, sincere woman he'd trusted for years. The anger simmering within him shifted to something colder, an unsettling realization. "So, you're telling me?" he said slowly. Someone else used Homeland's authority to pull my detainee out from under me without your knowledge? Sophia's face turned grim as she absorbed his words, her voice steady but laced with anger. It appears so. And if that's the case, then we have a serious problem. Whoever did this bypassed my chain of command, which means there's someone inside Homeland with enough reach to act independently. Gunner's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. Someone inside your agency is pulling strings and they're using you as cover. Sophia nodded, her face set with determination. I'll look into this immediately. Whoever ordered that extraction is not only undermining you, but putting my agency's integrity on the line. Gunner exhaled, the tension between them easing slightly as they found common ground in their shared frustration. Good, because this isn't over. I want to know who's behind this and what they're after. Sophia's gaze softened, a hint of regret crossing her face. I'm sorry, Gunner. I would never disrespect Echo Division like this, especially after everything we've been through. He gave a curt nod, his voice steady. I believe you. But whoever did this, they're making it personal. And I won't stand by while they pull my team into whatever game they're playing. She straightened, a determined fire in her eyes. I'll keep you updated. And if I find out who's responsible, you'll be the first to know. Gunner turned to leave, then paused, glancing back at her, his tone softening just slightly. Thank you, Sophia. I'm trusting you to handle this. With a final nod, he reached for his talisman, activating the portal back to the workshop. The confrontation had left him with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Echo Division wasn't alone in this battle, and the true enemy was still lurking in the shadows, manipulating the pieces from afar. The atmosphere in the Shadow Realm bar was heavy with murmurs and flickering shadows, as patrons, humans and supernaturals alike, conversed in low tones, each conversation adding to the cacophony of secrets within the bar's walls. Darren pushed his way through the crowd, scanning for Rose's familiar figure. He found her tucked away in her usual corner, her eyes glinting with a knowing look as he approached. She watched him with a faint smirk, her fingers idly tracing the edge of her glass. Well, well. Echo Division's errand boy back so soon. Could it be you've missed me, Darren? He scoffed, easing into the seat across from her. Miss you? More like I figured I'd come here before I could get roped into any more of Gunner's post-mission fun. His voice dropped, his tone more serious. But I am here for answers, Rose, and I'm guessing you might have some. Rose leaned back, her gaze sharpening. If I knew what you were dealing with, Darren, maybe I'd have answers, but you're being cryptic as ever. She leaned in, her voice a low murmur. I know the drugs being pushed through my bar, and no, I'm not thrilled about it. It's disruptive, dangerous, and has Ravina's name all over it. But beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. Darren nodded, his expression thoughtful. So Ravina's using your bar as her new market, and you're just letting her? Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger flashing in her gaze. Letting her? Please, I'm simply gathering intel, letting her think she's got the upper hand. She tilted her head, studying him. Why so interested, Darren? This drug of hers must be quite the problem if it has you running to me. Darren's eyes held hers, and he decided to share a sliver of what they'd uncovered. Let's just say it's affecting supernaturals in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's not just making them stronger, it's taking them over, controlling them from the inside out. Rose's expression shifted, the teasing edge fading as a cold seriousness settled in. So, Ravina's not just selling a high, she's selling control. He nodded. Exactly. And if it keeps circulating, there's no telling who or what might end up in her hands. Or in worse shape. She tapped her nails on the table thoughtfully, her gaze drifting as she processed his words. I don't like being kept in the dark on my own turf. Tell your boss that if he expects my cooperation, I'll need more than breadcrumbs. She paused, her dark eyes meeting his. And if you learn anything else, Darren, I expect you to keep me informed. Darren shrugged, the barest hint of a grin tugging at his mouth. Information for information. I get it. Just keep your ears open. If you catch even a whisper, I want to know. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Be careful, Darren, she said, her tone strangely soft, though her gaze remained sharp. Whatever Ravina's doing, it's big, and you don't want to end up another pawn in her game. Darren nodded, the weight of her words settling over him as he made his way back out of the bar, his mind racing with the knowledge that, whatever this drug was, it had drawn dangerous people and dangerous secrets out of the shadows. Eli's findings. Eli spent hours in her lab, running tests on the blood sample. Her results confirmed that the drug contained a blend of both magical and chemical compounds, an unusual combination. The analysis showed that the drug seemed specifically designed to bind to supernatural auras, amplifying the user's strength and resilience, while simultaneously weakening their mental control, leaving them more susceptible to external influence. Eli also discovered traces of a rare enchanted substance called voidstone in the sample, a mineral known to originate from Nythoria, the same closed realm where Karina's lineage lies. This mineral's properties suggest that whoever made the drug not only had access to rare realm-specific resources, but also advanced knowledge of supernatural biology. It's likely that Homeland's interest stemmed from the Voidstone's potential applications, not just its effect on supernaturals. Karina and Shade's findings at the warehouse. As Karina and Shade scoured the warehouse, they uncovered signs of hurried, incomplete searches, likely the remnants of Homeland's extraction team. In a corner of the room, hidden beneath loose debris, Karina noticed a crumpled paper with a faint, magical aura. Shade recognized the paper as a tracker charm, a subtle but powerful spell used to tag individuals or objects. The charm bore an unfamiliar crest, a twisted dark insignia resembling a black sun, which Shade identified as a symbol of the Black Dawn, an underground organization rumored to experiment with forbidden magic and rumored ties to Ravina's operations. The presence of this charm indicated that the detainee had been marked, possibly as a test subject or even a recruit. Additionally, Shade found a faint, glowing residue on the warehouse floor, matching Eli's earlier analysis of Voidstone's energy signature. This confirmed that Ravina, or someone in her network, had direct ties to Nythoria, connecting the drug operation to Karina's past and the shadowy Black Dawn faction. These discoveries would point to a much larger conspiracy, with the Black Dawn and Ravina manipulating both supernatural and government forces to spread the drug. They now have proof that Homeland's extraction was not just an intervention, but may have been an attempt to learn about and perhaps harness the effects of the drug, linking back to Nythoria and Voidstone's origins. The conference room was tense, each member of Echo Division seated around the table, their faces a mix of determination and wariness. Sophia had joined them at Gunner's invitation, her expression serious as she listened to the team's reports. Gunner stood at the head of the table waiting as each team member finished, their discoveries forming a disturbing puzzle. Eli cleared her throat, tapping her fingers on the tablet she held. The blood sample revealed some strange chemistry. The drug is a mix of magical and chemical compounds, specifically designed to bind to supernatural auras. It makes the user stronger but more susceptible. Whoever created this knows supernatural biology almost too well. Karina exchanged a glance with Shade, her expression grim. The Voidstone residue you found, right? She asked, her gaze sharp as she looked back at Eli. Eli nodded. Yes. The drug sample had traces of Voidstone, a rare mineral known to originate from Nythoria. Whoever made this has access to that realm, and they're using Voidstone to destabilize a user's control. Shade leaned forward, placing a small, crumpled piece of enchanted paper on the table. We also found this at the warehouse. It's a tracker charm, marked with the insignia of the Black Dawn. His voice was steady, but his eyes were dark. That detainee wasn't just a victim. He was marked as a potential recruit or test subject. Sophia's expression grew more concerned, her eyes flickering with recognition. The Black Dawn. They've been rumoured to deal in forbidden magic, but I never thought they'd expand to this extent. Gunnar crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on Sophia. And yet, your agents showed up, took our detainee, and interfered with our investigation. What exactly is Homeland trying to hide here? Sophia shook her head, her voice calm but resolute. Gunnar, I've already told you, no one in Homeland ordered that extraction. I checked the records. There was no helicopter dispatched, no tactical team deployed. Whoever took him, they weren't Homeland. A stunned silence filled the room as everyone processed her words. Darren was the first to break the silence, his tone laced with disbelief. So you're saying our detainee just vanished into thin air? Because someone used Homeland's name, gear, and access to snatch him out from under us? Sophia nodded, her voice unwavering. That's exactly what I'm saying. Whoever did this had the resources to bypass my authority and the means to make it look official. And if they have the Black Dawn's involvement... She paused, her voice trailing off as the weight of her words settled over the team. Karina's fists clenched, her gaze intense. So he's out there, and we have no idea who took him or why. If this was the Black Dawn, it's not just about the drug anymore, it's a power play. Eli's voice was quiet but firm. We're dealing with something bigger than just the drug. It's Nythoria, Voidstone, and now Black Dawn's experiments. Homeland isn't just an outside player. It's being manipulated, maybe from the inside. Gunnar's jaw tightened, the frustration visible in his stance. Then we have no choice. We find out who's pulling the strings. If the Black Dawn is in league with someone high enough to impersonate Homeland, this goes deeper than a rogue faction. Sophia's expression grew resolute as she met Gunnar's gaze. I'll keep digging on my end. If there's a leak within Homeland, I'll find it. But be careful. Whoever this is, they're already a step ahead. And if the Black Dawn's involved, they won't stop until they have what they want. Gunnar nodded, a new sense of urgency in his tone. Then we stay vigilant. Echo division's not waiting for answers to come to us. We hunt them down. The team's resolve hardened, each member feeling the weight of the mystery deepening around them. The lines had been drawn, and the threat lurking in the shadows was closer than ever.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next. Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.